Jing is the long-term power, and that's a kidney energy. Now, kidney is the home of fear, right? So the reason why we're so easily driven into fear, especially in the Western world, is because typical Western pattern is very high in chi. Like I think of Jim Morrison, very high in chi, very high in Shen, which is this aura, but there's nothing in the gas tank at like 30 years old, or in his case, 27 years old, that you run out of gas. And that's called a Jing deficiency. And Westerners are notoriously deficient in Jing. That was noted. For example, I first became aware of that in the Second World War research, that the Russians could survive 3 times as fatal of a series of gunshot wounds than a Westerner. Westerners would die quickly and Russians would hang in there. That's Jing energy. That's your ability to survive. So that's also your kidney energy. So it's easy to manipulate Westerners with fear because their kidneys are deficient. So what we go for is we go for the Jing energy and we go to nourish the kidneys. So there's a number of ways to do that. One of them is the hot colds, which of course, I think you're a huge fan of.
Huge. Yeah.
And swimming. I was swimming in the Atlantic Ocean 2 days ago. That was phenomenal. And I love swimming I was actually swimming in the ocean in New Jersey and in Maine. That was just fantastic. And I love doing wild river dips. We were doing that in Vermont. So just every morning, get up, go down to the river, boom, into the river, come back out, back into the river, come back out, back into the river, come back out, back into the river 4 or 5 times, to really get it. No sauna.
The brown fat too. Let's bring the brown fat into this, because when we do the hot cold, like I have 2 cold tanks in my garage and I have a sunlight and sauna. So I'm constantly doing that. And actually for Thanksgiving, we're going to have some family come over. I'm going to treat them to their first cold therapy. Talk to us about brown fat. I mean, I'm sure you've studied a lot of cold thermogenesis and hormesis, and this is a huge way to get us out of fear, to get us in the present moment, is through the cold. I mean, it's fucking wild.
Yeah, right. It is. And actually, so the brown fat, which is the darker meat, right? It's basically, you're a meat suit, just like a pig or a cow or any other mammal that's out there. And so as you develop that brown tissue, that brown meat, the brown fat, that's very in alignment with the Jing energy, right? So the darker that fat and that meat is, actually, if you're a meat eater, the better it is for you. You don't actually want the white meat. You want the darker meat. And that's also what you want for your own tissues. And that's what happens as you start to expose yourself, and you basically build up nerve force. In the old days, back in the Paul Bragg days, they called it nerve force. So that was what he was doing. He was like, I'm building up my nerve force by jumping in this cold water. But really the real thing that it builds up is Jing, which is resilience, right? And so that's a way to get it. I personally always will do cold dips if it's available to me, no matter how cold it is, no matter how windy it is, even if it's in Iceland in the dead of winter in the night. I've done that many times. That's really, the power of it is just, it builds you as you're like, oh, this is what a human's supposed to be, because we're not born with clothes. We're not supposed to be running around with all these these buildings with all these heat systems, and it's weakening us. It's domesticating us, actually. Yeah. And so what we're seeing is a play against domestication. So this is a Rudolf Steiner idea, is that just because we're domesticated, the forces of nature are not allayed. They're not just suddenly, like the saber-toothed tiger does not disappear. It just takes a different form and shows up as a doctor trying to jab you, right? The fangs coming at you. It will show up in numerous different forms to try to basically take you out of here. Because in this world that we're in, we have forces that are basically trying to exterminate us, and we have to survive. And that's for, in a wild environment, that's just obvious, right? Every day you're trying to survive. Yeah. But in a domesticated environment, you can be tricked. Now, another way to build Jing, I just want to keep on that point and on that frequency, is black foods. Black foods are always higher in Jing. So blackberries, if you have a choice, it's like, let's do the black rice instead of the brown rice. Let's do the black beans instead of the other colored beans. Let's stick onto the black foods whenever that's a possibility. One of the great kidney foods, very good inoculant against fear, is Rhamania, the great Chinese herb, the kidney's own food. And that's what I'm doing. So when I do an event in front of patriots or people who are like, okay, we're trying to, survive what's coming at us from every angle from the predator class, what we're doing is we're informing them of the Jing energy, and that, like, hey, you better get ready for a long fight, because we're at the beginning of inning 3 here in 2022, very beginning of inning 3. This is going to go extra innings. This is going to go 12 or 13 innings. This run that the predator class has laid out for us. They've been working on it for decades, if not hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, and they're going to go all the way with their plans. We better have enough energy to survive it. That's Jing energy. So the black food, being outside in nature, taking in the elements, going into cold water, and just doing things that are undomesticated, like being barefoot and being back as a sovereign being on the earth, like you are a natural being on the earth, and just taking that back into your being. And also the thought forms of like a wild being. See, what depletes Jing, and that's a very important point, is Jing depleting phenomenon like worry or excessive mental activity. As soon as you go into nature, as soon as you're jumping into cold water, that's gone. There's no more of this going. That's gone. That's
You're in the present moment. There's nowhere else to be.
There's nowhere else to be. And that's one of the reasons why it works. Another Jing depleting thing that I'm working on with when I talk to a younger crowd is, for men, is release of semen. That's a very dangerous release of Jing. And so what ends up happening is with the porn culture, and that's what I'm working on with kids, like get away from porn. Very, very dangerous, because it depletes you of Jing and it weakens you. And that's exactly what the predator class wants. So, those conversations come in as soon as the kid's like 14, 15, then you can start having that conversation with them, especially with the young men. Because they're being targeted with porn in particular to deplete Jing, which then obviously increases fear and decreases longevity.
Wow. I mean, personally, I've dealt with that porn addiction for 20 years. I've talked about it on the show. I've talked with Drew Manning on the show, who openly talks about that. The more we can bring light to this subject, let's be honest, sex energy is the creation force of life. So what you're talking about, that's what actually brings the Jing, right? The Jing is there. So every time we're basically climaxing as men, does the same thing happen to women? Can women get addicted to porn? I think they can. It's just the percentages are way lower. But essentially, this is a Jing steal, is what I'm hearing from you.
Yes. Now, with women, it's different, because this is probably why women live longer. I think there's a couple theories that stand out for me. One is that for men, our metabolism is based in testosterone, which is a very volatile hormone. It can flip over and become aromatized and turn into a toxic estrogen with one step. Whereas a woman's whole system is progesterone based, which takes 3 steps to flip over into a toxic estrogen. And therefore they live longer, as progesterone is more protective than testosterone. And you can actually form testosterone out of progesterone. So progesterone is a more master hormone. And to me, one of the greatest discoveries of our time is the discovery that really what's causing the breast cancer epidemic and many other problems, especially excessive menstruation problems, for example, which is a common theme of Jing loss in women.
Check out some of the videos on this screen that are perfectly curated based on the video you just saw. Make sure you follow me, and I'll see you in the next video.